Good evening, viewers. Welcome to our weekly legal show, Law with Mahbub Toha. We usually try to update you about all the latest immigration laws and we discuss some important issues or topic every week. Today, we will discuss about the vaccine amnesty announced by UK government. For this, we invited a renowned personal and a human rights campaigner, Mr. Paul Turner. He is head of Imperium Chambers. He is a public access barrister. You can find him on Twitter, Facebook with his continuous updates on immigration laws. You may watch his video vlogs, subscribing his YouTube channel. Mr. Paul Turner, welcome to our show. How are you today?
I'm very well, Mahbub. I hope you are as well. Keeping safe, I hope, as are the viewers.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, as we discussed earlier, we will discuss about vaccine amnesty announced by this government. So do you think this is helpful for the undocumented or illegal migrants in UK?
I think in theory, it's a fantastic move. It shows that the government have recognised that simply having 1.5 million people that are in the country who are either undocumented or they're frightened to go to their GP because they're frightened that they'll either be turned away or that the Home Office will get the information. Now, they're right to be frightened generally because the Home Office can obtain information from the NHS, and they do work together. So some clients in the past have had operations 10 years ago, and then they apply to extend their leave, and then they get hit with a bill of £6,000 or £7,000 for giving birth. Now, firstly, I think it's outrageous that they asked them after so long. And secondly, for £7,000, you could go to Great Portland Street and have your baby in a private hospital. So there is a link. But I think what the press announcement does is it says two things. It says that undocumented migrants will be given the vaccine and included on the vaccine program, and that the Home Office or the government have promised not to pass their details on to the Home Office. Now, this is a major concession. Now, one of the videos I'm going to be doing is the fact that there's a vital need for migrants who are either documented or overstayers to be vaccinated. Now, three reasons for that. The first reason is that I have a number of clients that have it's a particularly South Asian problem, diabetes, and that is carries a greater risk of death from COVID than someone that doesn't have diabetes. High blood pressure, hypertension, these are all factors that can lead to further death. Now, if somebody who's undocumented catches coronavirus and they suffer from diabetes or hypertension, or they have heart problems, then the NHS is going to have to treat them because they will treat emergency cases. They won't turn you away at the door and say you're not legal. They might carry out checks on your immigration status. And I had a case recently where the ambulance staff had an hour's argument with the doctor about treating somebody who didn't have a visa. And the ambulance staff got quite angry and said, we're here in the business of saving lives, not being immigration officers. So it is a really big step for this government because it's the first recognition that there is a large undocumented population. Previously, Boris Johnson has referred to 500,000 people. Most people think the figure is between about 1.3 and 1.5 million people. So it's a recognition that there is a large population. Now, when I was growing up, the population of the United Kingdom was shrinking. It was down to about 55 million. Now it's up to about 70 million. So it's growing. And 1.5 million people who are more at risk of this virus both of catching it and then passing it on, because unfortunately undocumented migrants are often abused at work, or they're not paid the right wage, or they're not treated properly, so they don't earn very much, which means they tend to live in houses where there are 5, 6, 7, 8 people rather than 2 or 3 people. Indeed, one house I went to see clients, there were about 10 people in one room. Now, that clearly goes against all the Home Office guidance. And of course, if one of those people catches it, everybody in that room will get it. And then when they get sick, then that's going to overload the NHS. So it's very important, because the Home Office have finally recognised that they can't ignore the 1.5 million or 1 million people that are in the United Kingdom. So the first thing I'm going to say is the positive, which is this could provide or could be a precursor to a more general amnesty in the future, because if they can include 1.5 million people or 1 million people in a vaccination program, then they can certainly do what they did in 2006 and set up a scheme whereby they deal with people that have stayed here for a long period of time. Now, if, as I say, if you're offered the vaccine, and I'm going to come to how you can get the vaccine, because this is where there's a problem and there's a bit of a scandal here. The press announcement was very welcome, and probably was driven by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, and backed up by the Prime Minister. But the person who's been quiet about all of this is Priti Patel. Now, there is a real difference in the dialogue. What you have from Priti Patel is she would drown migrants by throwing nets. She had a plan to put them in essentially porta cabins, like plastic houses, until she was told that that wasn't safe, and they were going to eat in big tents. And so she has these hostile policies that get crazier every day. They seem crazy to normal people, but it's strange because she's the direct descendant of migrants who would not get into the United Kingdom today. So you might think she might have some sympathy, but she seems to be playing to the right wing, the sort of people that support Nigel Farage. So you have this policy, this group, which is very much no to everything. And then you have the Health Secretary and probably the Chancellor as well, and the Prime Minister saying, look, the level of infections are still very, very high in the United Kingdom. There are about 16,000 a day or so. It's not plummeted. And the rate of infection is still quite high. And it's very high in migrant communities because they are densely populated. So what's happened is that someone has finally kind of stood up to Priti Patel and said that these people need to be treated as people. And the press announcement said that we're all in it together. Now, partly that's a generous type of scenario, and partly it's selfish, because if the general population all get the vaccine, or most of them get the vaccine, apart from the mad ones that think that they'll grow an extra arm or something, but then the undocumented migrants who tend to work in hospitality because it's easier to get a job, they're going to be coming into contact with the people that aren't vaccinated, and so it runs a risk of the virus continuing. So somewhere in government, they've recognised that there is this population that needs to be addressed. So the headline news that everybody should get one is good. Now, the practical question is, where do you get one? Well, you can't go and see Mahbub. He won't be vaccinating you. Neither am I. So it's going to be the health service. Now, this is where I'm going to provide the scandalous part of it, is that since the announcement, they haven't announced exactly how this is going to happen. Now, when they've announced the various rollouts of vaccines and what have you, they've always provided lots of details. and made it quite easy. However, in this particular case, they have not done that. Now, what my thoughts on that are, well, what do people do who qualify for the vaccine? People that are old, people that are clinically vulnerable, such as if they suffer from diabetes or hypertension or cardiovascular disease. What do they do? Now, firstly, if they've ever been registered with a GP, but they've been scared of going to the GP, they should go to the GP, and they should expressly mention what the government have said, because hopefully Matt Hancock will have told GPs that they shouldn't be refusing vaccines, and they should ask for when they're going to be vaccinated. Now, other than that, the government haven't announced any other plans as to whether people can temporarily register with the GP, or whether they're going to set up a separate computer system, or whether they can go to a mass testing centre or vaccination centre. So in the absence of that, what I would suggest is that individuals do go to their local GP and they say that they want to register for the purpose of this vaccine, and make direct reference to this amnesty. And then if English isn't your first language and you struggle with English, or you're old or you're infirm, take someone with you who has a very good command of English. Get a friend to go with you. Don't go on your own. And then ask to speak to the practice manager. Ask to speak to the practice manager. Do not just be fobbed off by the receptionist. And if you have to telephone, get the person who speaks the best possible English to telephone. And then if you get the receptionist being unhelpful, ask to speak to the practice manager, because a lot of GPs are working remotely. So if you have an old GP that you've never been to for a long time because you're frightened, get back in touch with them by phone, remind them that you exist, and say that ask where you are on the vaccination program. And if you're not on it, for myself, I'm in group 9, though I think I should probably be in group 6, but I'm in group 9. So they have already allocated people who are registered with the NHS and have an NHS number. They have already allocated them a group that they fall into. So you need to get fitted into the correct group. So, for example, if you've got someone that's quite elderly, say they're 71, and they've got, say, type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, and some other problems, then if they were registered but they've just not been going because they're scared, then they should go along, or they should phone up and get in touch with the GP, and say, I'm still here, I have not had my letter. And younger people should also do the same. So a lot of people have just, when they've seen the hostile environment, they've moved house, and then they've cut contact with the GP because they're frightened that they'll get a knock on the door at 5 in the morning from immigration. But I would say that if you were registered, as you say, get the best person who speaks the best possible English to get back in touch with the surgery, even if you've moved. Now, there are two things I would say here. If you've got access to your previous address and you don't believe the government and you think they're going to pass the details on to Priti Patel, and you've got access to the old address, just use the old address. There's no point giving yourself more stress than you already have. On the other hand, if you have a new address, give it to them on the basis that it is solely to be used for the vaccine. Now, if you are exceptionally worried about this, and you really want to get involved, and you really want the vaccine, and you're frightened about getting in touch with your GP, or getting a friend to phone your GP for you, then I'm sure Mahbub or myself or any other lawyer will help you by contacting the GP on your behalf and bringing this to the GP's attention. and that way the GP can then correspond directly with your lawyer, and your lawyer will act as a shield against you speaking to them directly. So if you are terrified, then that's what I would do. Secondly, for those people that have never registered with a GP, and there's a lot of people, I did a video and people said, oh, 90% of people have already registered with a GP. And that's not my experience. My experience is a lot of people just are too scared. And since 2012 and the hostile environment, are terrified. My experience would be there, depending on how comfortable you are. And this is something that's really personal, because if you are scared, then, and the vaccine is very important. For people in the Bangladeshi community, it is imperative that you get the vaccine. I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories that you'll grow an arm or you'll appear like a cat on YouTube. I don't think any of it's really true. People have been vaccinating people for years and years and years. I mean, myself, I've been vaccinated for everything from yellow fever to typhus to hepatitis to rabies, and I've still not gone mad or had any ill health problems. So I wouldn't be worried about it. But if you're not registered with the GP, find your local GP, then either, as you say, call them yourself, get someone who speaks a bit better English to call them, and explain your circumstances and ask them to put you on the register, or ask them how they intend to vaccinate you because you are 2 or 3 streets away. Again, if you have any concerns, see your lawyer, because the government have announced that they are going to vaccinate, but they haven't. The only way I can see that they're going to do it is that you've got to be entered onto the NHS system to actually be vaccinated. That then they're not going to just open up clinics and say anyone can turn up. If they did, I'd go straight there now. I'd just say, yes, please. I haven't got any documents. Please vaccinate me. So they're going to have to do it through the NHS, which means they're going to have to generate an NHS number, which will require personal details, including an address. But it's got to be made vitally clear that this information is not to be passed to the Home Office, and that the government have said that they will not pass it to the Home Office.
Yes, Turner, I just want to add something with you. As you said, Boris Johnson, when he was a mayor of London, he asked amnesty for the undocumented or illegal migrant at that time. When he became the prime minister, he was been asked for this in the parliament, but he did not say anything clearly. And later on, now we have seen, okay, Mr. Hancock, he announced this amnesty, vaccine amnesty, but they did not provide any details guideline. And as you said, Priti Patel is very silent on this issue. So how the people will reveal their trust on this government? Because people are scared. They are thinking, if I go to the GP, then my information will be passed to the UKVI. So in that situation, I know, of course, everybody should be vaccinated as early as possible. But in this dilemma, how people will trust the government? Because they're thinking, okay, if I go there, if I give them the address and contact details, then they will court me and they will deport me, who are here undocumented for a long time. So
I agree with you, Mahbub. If I was undocumented and I've been here for, say, 12 or 13 years, I might think it's a trick just to get me in so that they can then arrest me at a later date. Now, what I would say is, and this might sound a bit like overkill, but I would use your lawyer or contact somebody that's trustworthy who is a lawyer and provide them with a letter of authority, and get them to write to the GP asking for registration at the practice for the purpose of the vaccination, and requesting I'm thinking it through, and requesting that they be granted an NHS number. Now, if people are exceptionally worried about it, and they don't want to give their information, then they could use their lawyer as the post box. So they could say that, for example, I'm Paul Turner, I'm whatever it is, born on such and such a date. I don't have any papers. Here's a letter of authority. These are my lawyers. Can you deal with them? And can you give me the NHS number? And because I'm of no fixed abode, or I don't trust the Home Office, can you send the invitation letter to my lawyer? Now, it may be that the government releases and this, I think, is going to be the big problem for the government, because if they allow like a vaccination free for all, say, as I say, like we're going to open a centre in Tower Hamlets where people can just turn up and be vaccinated, then I mean, as I say, I'd go to Tower Hamlets, I'd get the Uber and go straight there now and say, can I have the vaccine? So I can't, plus there would be no real record of who was vaccinated and who wasn't vaccinated. So it's going to involve them setting up or allowing people to have to register. Now, as I say, thinking it through, and I don't trust the Home Office at all. I don't believe a word that Priti Patel says. So whilst Matt Hancock seems to be fairly sensible, and Boris Johnson doesn't seem to really care. He's now become Prime Minister, and I think that was his goal for the last 15 or 20 years. So I would use your lawyer, and I would get your lawyer to write to your local GP with all your personal details, maybe without your address, on the basis that you don't have a fixed address because you're not allowed to rent anymore under the hostile environment. And then the GP can write to the lawyer and send the vaccination invitation letter. Now, that might take a little bit of work to do, but it's, in the absence of anything, it is the only way of moving it forward, because I think they vaccinated today 15 million people. So they are getting through it quite quickly. So there are probably a large number of people that should have already been vaccinated who haven't been, and would qualify immediately if they had an NHS number. So if you really just don't believe the Home Office and you're scared, then what I would do is I would use a third party, and ideally a lawyer, because they can then refer to the press announcement, and that would provide you with a sense of security, because the Home Office wouldn't know where you live. And to be honest, they need to know that they have vaccinated people, not where you live or who you live with. So I think that's probably for today. And as I say, I mean, this announcement was last week, and no plans have come forward. And I think it's scandalous that they didn't say undocumented migrants are going to be included on the programme. They will be able to temporarily register with the GP, and their details won't be passed to the Home Office. And then everyone could just go and register and then wait in line. They've been conspicuously silent on the issue. So I think the best way of getting on it, and the safest way of getting on it, is through a third party, which would be your lawyer. And that way, even if the Home Office do obtain the data, they're only going to obtain your lawyer's information, and your lawyer doesn't have any obligation to pass on your address. That seems to me the only positive thing you can do. There's no point turning up at a mass vaccination centre. You'll just be sent away because they say you don't have an invitation letter. It's generating the invitation letter that's going to be the challenge.
Yes, Turner, what I understood as you were saying, everybody should engage a third party or lawyer with this. Before going further, I want to take few questions. I think you can watch one question here from Da Gossip TV. He asked, is an amnesty possible at this point? GPs are not aware of registering illegal migrants unless Boris may want to introduce the amnesty he promised. What is your comment on this?
As to whether a general amnesty is going to happen, I think they will have to introduce, I think what I think will happen will be, once most of the country is vaccinated and normal life returns to some degree, I think that the government will have, there'll be a reshuffle in the government. Now, Caroline Nokes was the immigration minister a few years ago, and she's a conservative. And she recently described Priti Patel's policies as inhumane. Now, that's a bit like one rabid dog biting another one. I mean, not that Caroline Nokes was rabid in any way at all, but she was a hardline conservative minister. And now she thinks that Priti Patel has gone too far. So there is this, I would say, this undertone of mistrust that is there. Now, as to an amnesty, the talk of amnesty and of illegal migrants and undocumented migrants, and the people that keep out speaking out in favour of them, such as myself and other lawyers, has, I believe, caused them to introduce this vaccine amnesty, because the government just simply can't ignore all the people screaming out for it. Now, as to a general amnesty, what I would say is that we'll need to get over this pandemic, and then I think that Priti Patel will be shuffled off to a different department. The reason why I say that is she's probably been the worst Secretary of State for the Home Department that I've had in 22 years of practice. There have been more reports condemning her and her department. I mean, we remember that she had to leave government once because she failed to tell us about trips to Israel. Then she was found to be a bully. Then 20 people were investigated in the Windrush compensation scheme because they were the same people that were drafting the hostile environment policies, and they never released that report. So I think that once the pandemic goes down, then we will go back to a system where they want to increase economic growth, which is where Rishi Sunak will come into play. And people say that he's probably the cleverest person in the government at the moment. And then there's going to be room for the government to look at an amnesty. There's another reason why I think they might do it, and that's because there's going to be an awful lot of EU nationals that are still in the UK, or non-EU nationals but married to EU nationals that haven't registered. And what's interesting is that these are the people that are the least educated and the least well qualified. And that's not surprising if you think about it, because if you're a doctor and you're from Holland, you've seen it on the news, you've sent off your details and you've got it done. But if you're a Lithuanian that is picking asparagus in Norfolk and living with 30 other Lithuanians, you might not be so familiar with it all. So I think that after the 30th of June 2021, there's going to be not only the undocumented migrants that are here now, but there's going to be a lot of EU migrants that the government won't really be able to deport, and will have been used to living in the United Kingdom. And then I think with a change of Home Secretary, Boris Johnson may make a big gesture, and then we might see a more general amnesty. But the fact that they've recognised that there are 1.5 million people undocumented, and the fact that they've recognised that they deserve treatment and should be treated as people, and not just numbers, is a positive step. So I would say not at the moment, because the country is still in crisis, and a lot of the Home Office are working from home. But afterwards, after the 30th of June and after the vaccination, then there will be pressure, because there will be the migrants that are here now, and then there will suddenly become a lot of EU migrants who become illegal. And it will be easier to do a sweeping up exercise for everybody. And the more people that push for it, the more likely it's going to happen. And there's something that's really important, which is that 5 years ago, about 70% of the people, the public, British, said there should be less migrants, less immigration. When they did the survey a few months ago, that figure was less than 50%. So it seems that the stronger and harder that Priti Patel is, the less the more sympathy is generated in the British public. So if they do consider or should consider an amnesty, it's not going to be where 70% of the public think there should be less migration. It's going to be in circumstances where, as a result of Priti Patel's policies, people feel more sympathetic. And that would make it easier for the government to do. So not now, but they're going to have to deal with it. They dealt with it in 2006, and they dealt with 500,000 cases. It was a big undertaking, but essentially somebody new came in and said the immigration service is not fit for purpose, and they started again. So that's my answer that's there.
All right, I want to take another question. Though this is a very big question, I think if you can read, then you can answer on it. Can you read this one?
Yeah. So my sister's lived in the UK for 9 years since she left the Caribbean due to domestic violence. Her daughter later joined and will be here 7 years in July. Also, a niece joined 2 years ago before she turned 18, has been here since. My question is, does she include a niece in the 7-year application route as a dependent? And what are the chances that she has no one to go back to? Her mum abandoned as a baby, and her current dad lives in the UK. Right, well, the key issue here, and not knowing the immigration history, the key issue here is that if the daughter has lived in the UK for 7 years, then as per, there are three things in her favour. There is paragraph 276 ADE, section 117B6, and they say that where someone has lived in the UK for 7 years, it has to be reasonable for them to leave. And then there's the case of MA Pakistan, which says that they need to find strong reasons to remove people where the child has been here for 7 years. And I've seen internal Home Office guidance which indicates that where there is a 7-year-old child, they don't tend to put up much of a fight. As to whether the niece should be included, if the niece is a member of the household and the niece is very close to the 7-year-old and they've all lived together, then she should definitely be included. And the application should be made before she becomes an adult. Because once she becomes an adult, 18, the Home Office will treat her not as part of the family unit, they will treat her as an independent adult. Now, if they make the application before she turns 18, even if it takes them 2 years to consider the application, they will consider it as at the date of application. What are the chances? Well, that depends on what lawyer you go to, because a competent lawyer like Mahbub or myself would tell you that your case is going to turn on how much evidence you put forward, whether it's medical evidence, whether it's psychological evidence, whether it's school reports. So on the facts of your case, if you can show that the 17-year-old is very close, you're all part of the family unit, then you're going to have a much better chance if you can provide evidence to show that. Simply going to a cheap lawyer who will write a letter that it just sets out, it's a cut and paste, you are wasting your time. You have a complicated application and it needs to be done properly. I'm looking at the squadron leader. It says, I have TOEIC issue, my whole case is dismissed. Is there any option? Which I do. Well, it depends when your case was dismissed and why. Now, if it was dismissed, now it could be dismissed for a number of reasons. One, your English was terrible at the appeal, and that influenced the judge. I had a case recently like that. Well, not recently, 2-3 years ago. And so if there is a decision and the judge says the squadron leader didn't know the front or the back of the aeroplane, then you're going to struggle. If it was, well, the Home Office evidence is very strong, and your solicitors didn't put in much evidence, then I would say you've got a very good case, because I've seen a lot of clients over the last 6 months where the previous solicitor just put in 3 or 4 documents, whereas my approach generally to making a new ETS application is, did you go to an English medium school at home, first of all? And most of these schools, surprisingly, in fact, every one is still in existence. They've been there for hundreds of years, so they're still there. That will confirm you've been speaking English since 5 or 6. Then I would put in the higher HSC and the SSC certificates showing that you can speak English. Then any other qualifications you obtained in English before you came. Then any evidence certificates in England. Then there are 2 other factors that people overlook. Did you work when you first came here? Now, if you came in 2010, you could legally work for 20 hours a week. So I always say, put in that evidence, because if somebody's interviewed you for a job and you've got proof that you were working and dealing with the British public, then you obviously spoke English. And then the last one, which doesn't always apply, is, are you in a relationship with somebody who is not of your culture or language? Because I've had people that come from, it's an odd coupling, a Pakistani and a Bangladeshi. Now, I know there's some history there going back to 1971, but over here they've got together and they don't speak, one speaks Bangladeshi and one speaks Urdu. The only language they communicate through is English. And the relationship is a very long relationship. So I got the partner to come to call and say, I met him, he was a good looking man. He and what most impressed it, sense of humor. And then I was able to say to the judge, well, look, if he couldn't speak English, how is he going to get somebody to marry him or be with him? So I think there are 3 elements to it, which, and this is before we get to the APPG, which is, did you put all your evidence in from the past? Have you ever worked, and have you put evidence in showing you worked? Are you or were you in a relationship with somebody that didn't speak your language? Lastly, the ETS test case is coming up on the 1st and 2nd of March. The good news is that unlike all the other ETS test cases, MA, Mobula, SM Kadir, the court have divided the case in the middle. So the court has said the first thing is the Home Office have got to prove that ETS are reliable. If we win, and Migrant Voice have joined in as well, then it's likely that there will be the entire Home Office case will crumble, because without ETS, there is no Home Office case. The good news is, and this is where the case, say, of MA fell over, was that the court criticised ETS extensively, but then they said, but and because the appellant had to give evidence and was cross-examined by a QC, a Queen's Counsel, because they were cross-examined by somebody very experienced, and because they were very nervous, the court found that they weren't telling the truth. So even if the court have massive doubts about anything from ETS, if the person performs worse than ETS, they're not going to allow the appeal. Common sense dictates that they're going to say, okay, well, the ETS evidence isn't very good, but you've actually done worse than ETS. And so in the test case, the actual individuals, DK and RK, and they're known by their initials in the Court of Appeal, they're not going to be giving evidence at the first hearing, which is listed for 2 days. We're going to be arguing that the evidence given by the 3 experts to the APPG is enough with the earlier cases to show that there is no case to answer. So, in short, if you are found to be a terrible English speaker, then you're going to struggle. If the case was 50-50 and a lot of weight was placed on the lookup tool and evidence from ETS, then I would say wait until the test case is decided, say the middle of April. Watch my video, watch Mahbub, because I'm sure he's going to be talking about this as well. If we win, then there will be about 57,000 people who have serious complaints to make about the Home Office. And the Home Office are going to be in huge difficulty because some people were detained, some people were deported, some people had to go home, people have lost their jobs. So that's the reason why the government are fighting. So the short answer is it turns on your personal circumstances.
Yes, I want to add something to my viewers. This is very generic advice here. So if you want details advice, of course, you can contact with your lawyer or with Mr. Paul. He's very expert on ETS issues, and we have done a lot of videos. Even you may watch some videos on TOEIC issues from my Facebook page. And if you follow Mr. Paul Turner's YouTube channel or Facebook or any other videos, then you will get a lot of information on ETS issues. Of course, you will be very benefited from those things. Paul, I want to, we have a few more questions today. I want to take all of them. So there is another one. How long does take the Home Office for spouse application? This is very simple, and I think you can say.
Well, at the moment, probably about 3 to 6 months. And again, and I'm going to follow on from what Mahbub has just said. The advice I've given is generic, so don't use that is what I would do, but it turns on the specific facts of your case, and you should get professional advice. As to how long an application can take, it could take 2 months, 3 months if it's straightforward. What I would also say is if you're making a spouse application, it might look like a really easy application to make. The requirements are you earn 18,600 a year if you don't have dependents. You've got 6 months pay slips and bank statements, English language, marriage certificate, evidence of the relationship. Sounds super easy. But what I would say is if you get it, you will get on the 5-year route to settlement and indefinite leave to remain. See a lawyer. It's not likely to cost a huge sum of money, but they will prepare the case They will help you with the online form. They can help you with uploading the documents, and they can check the documents. If you do it yourself, you might miss something. You might get the wrong English test. You might miss a bank statement. And the one thing the Home Office like to do is say no. And one of the key things that's happened is that rejected applications are now considered to fall into suitability as well as eligibility. So if you have an application previously, if you had no immigration leave or there was a mistake, it would come under eligibility and you could possibly overcome it. Now it's also classed as suitability, as it's a failed application puts you in the same category as a criminal or somebody that's dishonest. So 2 months, 3 months if you do it properly, 6 months if you just put all the documents in at random and fill in the form badly, or the worst case scenario is you tick the wrong box and it's rejected. And one thing I'm going to say, which is really important, is make sure you pay the fee. In the old days, they would send it back and say, oh, the money didn't clear. Can you send us the money? Now they will just treat it as invalid or rejected, and it will chase you around for years, and you'll spend a fortune sorting it out. I'm reading the question.
Yeah, this is a very big question.
Right. You have not read the Home Office policy guidance in respect of whether you can make an application whilst you have an outstanding appeal. If you said, I had an in-country appeal and I haven't received any decision on the permission application yet. Now, if that application was against something under the immigration rules, not EU law, which is separate, and for the safe side, I've already made FLR FP. You have basically made an invalid application. Section 3C says that you can vary your application up until the date of decision, but after the date of decision, you cannot vary the application. So if you don't have any gaps in your leave and you're still waiting for the Court of Appeal and you're coming up to your 10 years, then you would be fine to sit around and wait. And the Court of Appeal takes about a year at the moment, over a year, to make decisions. But I don't know I don't know who told you to make a new FLRO FP application. That's a waste of nearly £3,000 for the Home Office, and it's also a waste of any lawyer's fees. And if I were you, I would go back to your lawyer and say, why did you tell me to do it? If you're completing your 10 years in April, then what I would do is I'd hope and pray that the court, and if there is no gap in your leave, that they don't make a decision before the 10th of April, because then you will have continuous leave if there are no gaps. And then even if the Court of Appeal refused you, you could then make an application within 14 days saying, look, I've got 10 years. The Court of Appeal refused me after the 10 years. But 10 years itself, and I'll touch upon this, a lot of people say to me, oh, I've made an application I came in 2010, I was rejected in 2008, I was rejected in 2009, now I want to make my 10-year application. And the problem is, and this is covered in the case of Hock HOQUE, is if your leave ended, you can make a valid application, depending when, either within 28 days, which was before the 28th of November 2016, or 14 days afterwards. A valid application means that the Home Office won't reject it for suitability or eligibility. So it's valid. So if you were to say your leave ran out on January the 1st, and on January the 2nd, you put in a valid Tier 4 application, then or marriage application, then the Home Office would probably grant it. What a valid application, saying it's valid is not saying you've got 3C leave. It doesn't extend your leave at all. And this is a common mistake. I see people before me 11 or 12 years or 9 years, and they say, oh, but I've got 10 years. And then you look and you see that they last had leave 5 years ago, but they've gone to dodgy lawyers who said, just get to 10 years and you can make the application. And the applications are usually refused if there's no family members and no ill health. And they're usually given no right of appeal. And if you go for judicial review, the upper tribunal tend to be quite hostile. So you need to go back to your lawyer, or you need to go and get a second opinion as to what you've done. Because if someone's told you to do it, you've been misadvised.
This is about child
arrangements. If police are not telling anything, social worker not helping, child mum. Right, take your name off the screen now. Obviously, I'm not going to mention any names. If you are involved in family court proceedings, then you need to see your lawyer and get your lawyer to talk to get an order from the family court. If you are not involved in family court proceedings and the police are just being difficult, you need to see your lawyer or a good lawyer, because you can write to the police and you can get disclosure, like a subject access request. You can get disclosure from the police. So before going down that route, I would say you need to, as you say, if you have a family lawyer, get them to ask the family court to direct the police to provide you with information. I understand what it's like to be the victim of false domestic violence allegations. And the trouble is that when they are made, social services take over. And unless you're familiar with the English legal system, you will feel lost. So you should have a family lawyer to deal with it. If you haven't, but you just want to find out from the police, again, get a lawyer to write to whatever station, or if you've got the policeman's name, and ask for disclosure. If they refuse, you can always do an application to get the information from the police. And they have a particular form, it's called ACRO, and they will disclose all the information they've got on you. If you think the information is incorrect and you dispute it, you can apply to have it changed. I had a client who there was a record of an arrest 10 years ago, and the circumstances were dodgy, to say the least. And I put together evidence and made an application, and the police wiped his name off the system. So if there's domestic violence, there's probably family court proceedings going along. The police will not go behind the family court and tell you things. So if there are family court proceedings, see a family lawyer, get them to go to court so you can find out the information and fight the allegations. If there aren't proceedings, you might want to start them, and that would be by way of a child arrangement order, Section 8 of the Children's Act 1989. Or if you just want information from the police, contact the local police station. Again, if you want to carry greater weight, use a lawyer, because the police will give you more respect. I know it's sad, it's wrong, but that's just how it is in this country.
Thank you, Paul. I believe our viewer already got the answer. Before moving forward to next topic, I want to know your final comment on vaccine amnesty in a brief.
Vaccine amnesty is a fantastic idea. How they put it into effect is difficult. If you meet any of the criteria and you should have been vaccinated, the safe bet, see your lawyer, get them to write to the local GP and ask for a vaccine invitation letter.
Thank you.
And if you're worried about them, the NHS and the Home Office conspiring, if you use a lawyer, then you don't need to give your address.
Thank you, Paul. We want to discuss a bit on post-Brexit impact on EU citizens. So what will be your comment on that? Because as we know, Brexit transition period will be finished by 30th of June this year. So people are doing settlement status, pre-settlement status, but nowadays a lot of people are getting refused from the Home Office on pre-settlement status, even settlement status. So what will be their situation in future?
See, this is something that I talked about 3 or 4 months ago. The Home Office held back a load of applications, hundreds of thousands of applications. Now, they didn't say what type, but my suspicion was that they were from non-EA family members, extended family members, and people without IDs. Now, I'm getting a lot more people coming through the door at the moment in exactly as Mahbub says, this problem. The first thing I would say is, if you are an EU national or a non-EEA national and your paperwork is in order, make the application as quickly as possible. I say that for 2 reasons. One, it will be dealt with quickly if all the paperwork is in order, and then you can forget about your immigration status. 2, if the Home Office refuse it because you've made a mistake or they've made a mistake, you'll have plenty of time to resubmit it. If you sit around thinking, June, long way away, it's -1 outside, 30th of June is the height of summer, it's 4 months away. So first thing is, act quickly. Second thing, a lot of people I've had rejections from non-EEA members because they don't have valid ID documentation, or for some reason they're estranged from their EU spouse. Now, there is guidance for you to get your settled or pre-settled status. An ID is the main concern, because a lot of people have applied for residence cards but haven't got them yet, or extended family member cards and they haven't got them yet. So when they apply for their EEA or EUSS rather, they're rejected because they don't have a valid card. Now, the Home Office guidance, if you dig into it, does say that if there are exceptional circumstances and say you've got an out-of-date ID, you can submit that. If you are in that position, then you must go to a lawyer, because I've had people come to me with 3 or well, the most was 4 EUSS rejections because they could do it themselves, because it was free. They thought they would just write some letter, not setting out the law. So there is an exception for people without ID, whether that's EU or non-EEA. There is a big issue about people that are sponsoring non-EEA members who are sponsoring non-EEA members. Now, in the past, a while ago, once you were granted a residence card, whether that's under Regulation 7 or Regulation 8, you were treated as if you were an EU national and therefore able to sponsor people. But they have rewritten the regulations, the 2016 regulations, into the EU appendix, but they've made it tougher, and they've made it tougher for non-EEA nationals. So if you are missing an ID document, or you've got an old one, the first thing you need to do is you need to check with your embassy or High Commission to see whether they have extended identity documents because of COVID, because some embassies are shut. So they've said, well, if your ID document expired 31st of January, we're going to extend them all to the 6th of June. So even if it says it's invalid, it is not. It's valid. You need to get proof from the embassy or High Commission. Again, that's a job for a lawyer, unless you're very confident. So you can get it without ID. There are provisions for it, but you must use a lawyer, because I have seen, and I'm sure Mahbub has seen a lot of them as well, where they just send it back saying no ID, no EUSS, and that was completely against the everything the government has said for the last 3 years, that the EUSS is like so quick, you can do it on your phone on an app, and you'll get your card in a week. Now, if you do it properly, you will get your card in a week or 2 weeks. But if you don't, you don't. Next issue really is residency. Now, for settled status, it has to be 5 years continuous residency. That can be established with no documents. If you've been working for the same employer or different employers, and you provide your national insurance number, the government will do checks with HMRC, and they will see that you've been here ever since. If you've had periods of unemployment, or you've been looking for a job, or you pay cash in hand, then you're going to need to get documents to establish your residency. I don't say you need them for every single day or every month, but you will need a fair amount for each year to guarantee your settled status. Otherwise, you'll be looking at pre-settled status. Our next question that is asked is, well, I've been out of the country for more than 6 months. That generally means that you're looking at pre-settled status, unless there are specific compassionate circumstances. Now, one of these can be COVID. That could be a genuine reason. You've gone to go and visit relatives, and you've caught coronavirus, or you've been isolated, or your flights have been cancelled. Now, if the Home Office refused you settled status on that basis, you'd have an excellent case to go to the High Court and get it sorted out. Now, there's one other thing that I'm going to mention on the EUSS. There will be a lot of people, EU and non-EEA, that have got lawful residence permits that were issued for, say, 5 years in 2019. And so they've got the card and they think, I can't be bothered to do the EUSS. It's just I don't like forms. This is valid. I don't need to do anything. Wrong. You do need to do something. You need to, because after the 30th of June 2021, these residence cards are not going to be, they're not going to be valid. And the government will, if you try to go to court and argue it, the government will say, we've spent hundreds of millions of pounds telling people about the EUSS. It is a remarkably simple scheme. Why did you not, in the last 5 or 2 years or 1 year, fill in the form and get yourself settled status? Now, unless you've got some excuse such as infirmity or mental incapacity, or you had an operation, an accident, or you're outside the country because of COVID or something, the court are not going to be interested. Now, Mahbub's right to mention the EUSS, because in most areas of law, I can pretty much tell you what the two things, what the rules say and what the courts say. With the EUSS, it's not been tested in court. So identity documents, absences from the UK, expired residence permits, whether that still justifies you to stay in the UK, that's not, there's no upper tribunal, there's no court of appeal, there's no Supreme Court case on this. I think there will be, because as Mahbub has mentioned, and I've seen, there are lots of people who would have previously been granted the equivalent of settled status, not getting it, and they're unhappy. And the letters tend to be devoid, empty. They just say you didn't do X, so therefore you're not getting settled or pre-settled status. So in theory, you could, if you've done it properly, challenge it by way of judicial review. But simply, we don't know what view the court will take. The court could say, you've had time to do this. Why didn't you do it before? Now, Mahbub has raised this, and I affirm it. There are about 4.5 months, March, April, May, June, 4.5 months to get your status sorted out. If you have any doubts at all, just, and I keep saying this and I sound like a parrot, but I say it on purpose, make sure you go to a reputable lawyer, not the lawyer that that poor gentleman went to, told him to make an application and waste £3,000 or £4,000. Go to a reputable lawyer, set out all the papers that you've got and any refusals, tell them the truth and make it their problem. Don't suffer in silence. Don't wait to the last minute, and don't expect that the government are going to be generous after the 30th of June 2021. Remember, this government got elected on 3 words: get Brexit done. No economic policies, no immigration policies, no healthcare policies, no business policies. 3 words. That's why they got elected. All the cabinet ministers were given their jobs because they supported Brexit. So you're not going to get any sympathy. And I think the courts are also likely, unless you were ill, or you had a relative that was ill, or coronavirus stopped you from coming or applying. I think that if you wait 4 months and then you get a refusal because you only make the application at the last minute, you will be harming yourself.
Thank you, Paul. We have already, it's been more than an hour. We have to stop here.
Gosh, it goes very quickly.
Yes, thank you very much for being with us, and we are very grateful. And NL24 TV is very grateful to you to give us.
It was a pleasure.
I believe we'll have you in another time. Thank you again for your useful discussion for our viewers. Dear viewers, we have to stop here today. We'll be coming in coming weeks with another topic. I believe you will watch our program and then you will get some information and then you will be benefited. If you have any question, leave your question here. We will try to answer in our next program. Thank you very much for being with us, for watching our program. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mahbub. Take care and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.